When my stepfather gave my brother $500,000 to buy a house, I got nothing. So I set my conditions for future support and I found out by accident. I was visiting my brother Noah at his new place, expecting some small starter house he'd scraped up savings for. But as I walked up the driveway, jaw practically on the floor, I realized I was looking at something else entirely. A beautifully renovated, modern two-story in an upscale neighborhood. It even had one of those high-end security systems where you can open the door with your phone. Since when are you a tech mogul? I half-joked as Noah let me in, my voice trying to keep it light even though my mind was racing. "Oh, yeah, it's nice, right?" he replied casually, as if I hadn't just walked into a house that cost more than any two of our apartments combined. Jack helped out a lot. Couldn't have done it without him. That was the moment my stomach dropped. Jack helped out? Sure, Jack always gave us occasional loan money growing up, like help with college tuition, when he could afford it, or the occasional car repair loan. But this was different. You don't just help out with a house like this unless we're talking about serious money. I pushed a bit, trying to keep it casual. What do you mean? Did he help you with a down payment or something? Sort of. Noah was rifling through some boxes, not even looking at me. He gave me $500,000 for it. All in all. Kind of insane, right? Kind of insane. I could barely think straight. $500,000. Just hand it over, like some regular Tuesday gesture. Noah shrugged as if it were no big deal, chatting about square footage and neighborhood amenities, but I was somewhere else entirely. This was beyond Jack's usual favoritism. It was outright bias. And I was only hearing about it now? When Jack married my mom, Lisa, Noah and I were barely teenagers. Jack came from money, old-school finance kind of guy, with that too-cool detachment where you never quite knew what he was thinking. He never officially adopted either of us, but he was around, providing, playing the role of father figure, at least on the surface. But even as a kid, I always had this gnawing feeling that Jack preferred Noah. Noah, with his straight A's, his all-star basketball status, his you're-going-places aura. Meanwhile, I was the kid who got good effort comments on math tests, who showed up late to games and had a messier, more rebellious streak. As I drove back to my apartment that evening, my head was still spinning. $500,000. That's the kind of gift that changes lives. And I couldn't remember the last time Jack had done anything even remotely similar for me. Sure, I'd accepted the fact that he liked Noah more, but it had never occurred to me that he might feel my future was somehow worth less. For the next couple of days, it was all I could think about. I kept wondering if I was just being petty. Maybe I was just jealous, and then I'd remind myself, $500,000. That's not some minor difference in treatment. That's a whole life's worth of privilege, a full-on head start that I'd never even been considered for. So, I finally decided to confront Jack. Maybe he'd tell me there was a reason, something that would make sense if I just heard it. Or maybe he'd realize what he'd done, apologize, and offer me a chance to even things out. I figured there was no way to know until I brought it up. I texted him, "Hey Jack, can we talk sometime soon? There's something on my mind I'd like to discuss." He responded an hour later, "Sure thing, Alex. Come by the office around 3 tomorrow." The next afternoon, I found myself in Jack's corner office, staring out at the panoramic view of the city, hands sweaty and throat dry. Jack sat across from me, his fingers steepled, watching me like I was a client about to pitch a risky investment. "So," he said, that characteristic calm in his voice, "what's on your mind?" I took a deep breath. "I know about the money you gave Noah." Jack didn't flinch. If anything, he seemed more relaxed, as if he'd known exactly what I was going to say. "Yes," he said. "I helped him with the house." The simplicity of his response threw me off, but I pressed on. "Look, I'm not saying you shouldn't have helped Noah, but it's a lot. $500,000 is a lot of money. I can't help but wonder why he got that kind of support, and I didn't even know it was on the table." Jack tilted his head, considering me in that maddeningly patient way of his. "Alex, Noah's in a different position than you. He's settled. He's found his career. He's ready for the next steps, you know? You're still finding your way." "Finding my way?" I almost laughed. It sounded so patronizing. "Jack, I'm almost 28. I'm not exactly a kid anymore. Yes, he agreed. But there was no warmth, no reassurance. But let's be realistic, Alex. You've had different needs, different interests. You didn't finish college. You've bounced between jobs. You're still searching. I felt my face flush with frustration. Just because my path isn't a straight line doesn't mean I don't deserve a leg up, too. It feels like you're rewarding Noah for being a perfect son and ignoring me because I'm not. Jack leaned back, exhaling slowly. It's not about favoritism, Alex. It's about readiness. I don't see it as giving him a reward. It's an investment in his future. When you're ready for that kind of responsibility, we can discuss support. I could feel my anger rising, but I held it in, trying to keep my voice level. Ready for responsibility? So, you're saying that my future isn't worth the same investment because my choices don't line up with your expectations? Jack raised his hands as if to calm me down. Alex, I understand how you're feeling, but it's a matter of timing. I've supported you differently, the car loans, some rent help. It's not like I've ignored your needs. You're right, I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. You haven't ignored my needs, but you haven't treated us equally either. And it's not just about money, Jack. It's about the way you see me, like I'm somehow less deserving. He frowned, as though the idea truly puzzled him. That's not how I see you, Alex. But I can't change the fact that Noah's reached a point in his life where he can handle certain things, and you haven't. At that point, I realized I wasn't going to change his mind. His idea of fairness was rooted in the idea that Noah deserved a massive head start because he fit Jack's idea of success. And I was just a wild card in his eyes, a loose end that didn't match the family narrative. Leaving his office, I knew that this wouldn't be the end of it. Jack wasn't going to hand out the same level of support, not unless I proved myself to his standards. But I was done sitting by and watching this bias play out, pretending it didn't hurt. Jack had set a bar for future support, and if that was the game, then maybe it was time I set some conditions of my own. The next few days after that conversation with Jack felt like one long, simmering headache. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't speak up now, I'd always be overlooked. Jack had made it clear. Support would only come if he felt I was ready. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I knew I needed to push back, and this time, I was going in with a plan. I reached out to Jack, keeping the message short and professional, almost businesslike, asking if he had a moment to discuss some ideas I had for my future. He replied, "Sure, we can talk. How about tomorrow at my house? 5 p.m. I spent hours going over my points, mentally rehearsing every possible response. It felt surreal, having to pitch the idea of my future to the man who was supposed to be a father figure. But if Jack wanted me to prove I was serious, then I'd go in with concrete terms. When I arrived, Jack was already sitting in his study, scrolling through emails on his tablet. I took a seat across from him, feeling oddly formal. He looked up, smiling faintly. "So, Alex," he began, folding his hands, "you wanted to discuss your future?" "Yes," I replied, clearing my throat. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how Noah's ready for that kind of responsibility and, well, I want to be taken seriously too. So, I wanted to talk about a plan. If you're willing to offer that kind of support, then I think it's only fair to set up some terms for my future as well." Jack's brows knit together slightly. "Terms?" he repeated. "Yes. You've always supported Noah and me, but I think it's time for a more structured approach if we're going to keep things fair." I could feel the tension building, but I pushed forward. What I'm asking for is support in the areas that would actually help me move forward. If we could agree on conditions for things like education, career development, maybe even housing if needed, then I think it would keep everything balanced. Jack was silent for a moment, looking at me with that careful, assessing stare he usually reserved for his business associates. "I'll admit, I wasn't expecting this, Alex. You're asking for a lot, especially given your, let's say, unconventional track record. It feels a bit bold." I could feel my pulse quicken. "Jack, with all due respect, I'm asking for fairness. I know you see Noah as the safe bet, but I'm capable of responsibility too, even if my path has been different." Jack's gaze hardened, a look I recognized from childhood, a look he used whenever he was getting impatient with me. "Alex, Fairness isn't about handing out money equally. It's about understanding each person's needs. No one needed that help to secure a house. You're not there yet. And frankly, it feels ungrateful to ask for more when you've already received help. My frustration bubbled over. Ungrateful? Jack, I'm not asking for more. I'm asking for a promise that my future won't be ignored. $500,000 can change a life. You've given Noah that chance. Why shouldn't I expect similar support when I'm ready? Jack shook his head, a strange expression settling over his face. This is exactly what I was afraid of. That giving one of you a leg up would lead to resentment. Alex, I've tried to be there for both of you, in ways that go beyond finances. But you're acting as though I owe you something. That's because you do. I blurted out before I could stop myself, surprised by the anger in my own voice. You stepped into this family and took on the role of father, whether you officially adopted us or not. You don't get to play favorites when it's convenient and then pull the "I don't owe you" card when it's not. He narrowed his eyes, taking a steadying breath. Maybe you're forgetting that I didn't have to step into this family at all. I was never obligated to take on the role of father. You have a father, Alex, and he was the one who walked away. The words hit like a slap. We'd barely ever spoken about my biological dad. He'd left when I was little, and my mom remarried Jack a few years later. But hearing Jack bring it up so coldly was like ripping off a bandage I hadn't realized I was still wearing. You think I don't know that? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. But you can't keep holding that over my head. You chose to marry my mom. You chose to raise us. And now it feels like you're only fully supporting one of us. He sighed, leaning back. Alex, it's not about punishment or favoritism. It's about practicality. Noah has been dependable, straightforward. His goals align with the values I know will pay off in the long run. I just don't see the same guarantee with you. Because you never tried to see it, Jack, I said, feeling the anger drain out, leaving a hollow exhaustion behind. You wrote me off a long time ago, and now you're hiding behind practicality because you don't want to admit it. Just then, I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. Noah walked in, stopping short when he saw us both sitting there in tense silence. His eyes shifted from me to Jack, and he frowned. What's going on? Your sibling thinks they're entitled to an equal share of support, Jack said, his voice tight. Apparently, my investment in you has sparked some discontent. Noah's face flushed as he turned to me, his jaw tight. Are you serious, Alex? I thought you were cool about this. We've been talking for years about getting a place, and Jack helped out. But now you're throwing a fit? I looked at him, taken aback by how quickly he was jumping to Jack's defense. It's not about your house, Noah. It's about being treated fairly. You got help, and that's great. I'm just asking for similar support when the time comes. Noah shook his head, crossing his arms. This sounds like jealousy, Alex. Not everything's a competition. I get it. Okay? Maybe things haven't always been even. But we're family. This kind of stuff tears families apart. Jack nodded in agreement, his expression one of cool satisfaction, like he just won a debate. Exactly. This kind of resentment only leads to more division, Alex. It's not healthy. I'm not trying to create division, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm trying to set things straight. I want to know that if I ever need real support, it'll be there. Just like it was for Noah. Jack sighed, rubbing his temples. Fine. If you feel that strongly, then let's make this clear. I will consider your conditions for future support if, and only if, you demonstrate a solid commitment to something. If you're still bouncing from job to job, don't expect a dime. Is that clear? The room went silent. I realized that, despite his words, Jack was putting a condition on his support after all. If I didn't fit into his mold, then I was on my own. Noah just stared at me, looking somewhere between hurt and frustrated. Look, Alex, I don't know what you want, but maybe Jack has a point. You need to figure things out for yourself. It's not always about getting help. Hearing that from Noah was the final blow. I'd hoped he might understand, or at least back me up in trying to keep things fair. But he was just as unwilling to see my side. I stood up, taking a deep breath. I get it. Neither of you thinks I'm worth the risk. But don't expect me to just sit back and play along with that forever. With that, I left, feeling both lighter and more bitter than ever. My relationship with Jack was clearly on the line, and even Noah seemed to be slipping further away. I didn't know where to go from here, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't keep bending to Jack's conditions. If he wanted things to be fair, he'd have to meet me halfway. After that last encounter with Jack and Noah, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was going on. Jack had been so rigid, almost hostile, in the way he treated my request for fairness. It was like asking for the same support was somehow a personal threat to him. There had to be more to it. I decided to dig into our family's history, hoping that understanding where Jack came from might give me insight into why he was so intent on this conditional support. I started with some light internet searches, mostly out of curiosity. Jack didn't talk about his family much, and I'd always assumed they were the typical affluent, private kind. But after a couple of hours online, I realized I was missing a bigger picture. There were no photos of Jack's family at any public events, no charity dinners, no social profiles connected to him. Even with his wealth, it was like Jack's family didn't exist. The real breakthrough came when I remembered an old box of family papers my mom kept. She'd said it was mostly letters and mementos from her own parents, but I'd never actually gone through it. I found it tucked away in a storage closet in her basement, layered in dust and nostalgia. Going through the yellowed papers, I stumbled on a few documents that weren't from my mom's side. Instead, they were old letters from Jack's family. At first, they looked like ordinary correspondence, but a few sentences jumped out, giving a startling glimpse into Jack's past. One letter was from Jack's father, written right after he passed down a substantial inheritance. It read more like a legal warning than a warm note to a son. It emphasized responsibility and prudent use, urging Jack not to squander family assets on the frivola and to uphold the family's legacy. The tone was sharp, borderline threatening. There were other letters too, just as severe, chiding Jack for the choices he'd made and warning him of the repercussions if he failed to honor the family's money with suitable decisions. But there was one line, buried at the end of a particularly intense letter from Jack's father, that struck me. "Remember, son, those who don't respect the gift don't deserve it." That was it. Jack's family had practically conditioned him to believe that money was something he had to control tightly, that any financial help had to come with ironclad expectations. It felt like a revelation and an explanation all at once. Jack wasn't just reluctant to give me help. He'd been trained to see money as something that had to be controlled, even weaponized. He hadn't just given Noah a house. He'd secured Noah's loyalty, shaping him to fit his vision. I'd always felt that Jack used money to control things, but now I understood just how deeply that belief ran. And, even more importantly, I knew it wasn't about me at all. Fueled by this knowledge, I decided it was time to confront Jack again. I sent him a text, short and to the point. "We need to talk. I understand more about where you're coming from." He responded immediately. "Tonight, 7 p.m. Don't be late." That evening, I walked into Jack's study with the documents in my hand, feeling a surge of nerves but also a strange sense of confidence. Jack looked up as I entered, his face unreadable. "What is it, Alex?" he asked, gesturing for me to sit. I took a seat but held out the letters, not willing to play the casual card this time. "I found these. They're from your family." His face tightened as he looked at the letters. I could see a flash of something, anger, embarrassment, cross his face before he composed himself. "Where did you find those?" he asked, his tone cold. "Mom kept them. I was just going through old stuff and happened to find them," I said. "I read them and—" "Jack, I think I finally understand why you're so obsessed with conditions and expectations. I get it. Your family treated money like a weapon, something to control people with. And it's like you're doing the same thing to us." Jack's face darkened, and he took a deep breath, looking away as if he were trying to rein in his anger. "Alex, you have no idea what you're talking about. Those letters don't concern you." "Maybe not," I shot back, feeling a surge of boldness. "But they explain a lot. You're not helping Noah out of love or fairness. You're doing it because you need him to be a certain way. And that's why you won't support me unless I fit into some mold you've created. It's not about fairness, Jack. It's about control." Jack's mouth twitched, and for a second, I thought he might actually yell. Instead, he clenched his fists, his voice low and even. You have no idea the pressure I was under growing up. My father would have disowned me if I'd stepped out of line, and I refused to let that happen. I learned to respect what I was given, to understand that family money isn't a handout. It's meant for those who can uphold the family's values. I shook my head, incredulous. So you're saying that Noah's house is some reward for being the perfect son? And I'm supposed to prove myself to you before I get anything? That's exactly what I'm saying, he said, his voice steely. I'm not going to throw money at someone who isn't ready for it. Money is a responsibility, Alex. You treat it like some right, but it's not. It's earned. Just then, Noah appeared at the doorway. He must have been listening in, his face tense. What's going on? Your sibling seems to think they're entitled to my money without the same responsibility you've shown, Jack replied sharply. Noah's gaze flickered between us, and I could see something change in his eyes as he processed what Jack was saying. Alex, maybe Jack has a point. Look, it's not that he doesn't care. He's just trying to do what's best for everyone. I felt a pang of betrayal. You're actually defending this? Noah shrugged, looking uncomfortable. It's not about favoritism, Alex. It's about making choices that align with the family. I mean, Jack's always been there for us. And he's just ensuring that support goes to people who are ready for it. It hit me then. Noah wasn't just accepting the money. He was accepting Jack's control. Jack had bought his loyalty, shaping him into someone who saw conditions as natural, even necessary. And Noah had chosen to defend Jack, just as Jack had hoped he would. You don't get it, Noah, I said, shaking my head. Jack's not doing this to help us. He's doing it to feel powerful, to keep us in line. Enough, Alex, Jack interrupted, his voice ice cold. You don't understand because you haven't earned it. And with this attitude, you never will. I stood up, feeling the weight of the resentment and bitterness that had been simmering for years. Fine, I don't need your support then. But don't think for a second that I'll ever be under your thumb the way you have Noah. I could see the flash of anger in Jack's eyes, but he stayed silent, just staring at me. Noah opened his mouth to say something, but I didn't want to hear it. I was done trying to fit into their idea of family. I left the house that night feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. I'd confronted Jack, finally aired the truth, but in the process, I'd seen how deeply Jack's control had seeped into our family. Noah and I might never see eye to eye on this, and Jack had all but made it clear I wasn't part of his investment plan. But I'd also realized something that gave me strength. Jack's control only worked if I let it. I might never get a dime from him, but at least I could live on my own terms, free from the grip he had on Noah. And maybe that was worth more than any inheritance ever could be. The fallout from that confrontation was immediate and brutal. Noah stopped responding to my texts and calls altogether. I tried reaching out a couple of times, hoping he'd come around, but every attempt was met with silence. At first, I thought maybe he just needed time, but it soon became clear this was intentional. He was choosing Jack's side, committed to maintaining that allegiance. Each ignored call, each left-on-read message was like a fresh sting. A reminder that the brother I thought I'd had was more interested in keeping the peace with Jack than supporting me. One evening, after another ignored call, I texted Noah directly. Can we please talk? I don't want this to ruin our relationship. He responded an hour later, and the message was brief and cutting. Alex, you're being selfish. Not everything's about fairness. Grow up. I stared at the screen, stunned by how quickly he'd turned. Selfish? The word felt like a slap. Noah, who just accepted $500,000 without blinking, was calling me selfish for daring to ask for equal treatment? My head swam with anger and frustration. Noah didn't get it, and maybe he never would. Jack had already won him over, made him complicit in this twisted version of family. But it wasn't just Noah. Jack made it abundantly clear he wasn't backing down, either. A few days after my argument with Noah, I got a curt email from Jack's office. No formalities, no warmth. Just a few blunt lines. Alex, until you're willing to apologize for your outburst and drop these demands for support, I see no reason to offer further assistance. My terms have always been fair. If you're unwilling to accept them, then perhaps you're not ready for support after all. Jack. I felt a familiar wave of anger and frustration reading those words. An apology? For asking to be treated equally? Jack wanted me to grovel, to backtrack and accept his conditions without question. I was tempted to just block his email, shut it all out. But I also knew that in cutting me off like this, he was making a point. Jack was telling me, in no uncertain terms, that I had to play by his rules or get nothing. Feeling utterly alone, I turned to the one person I hoped might understand. My mom, Lisa. She'd always stayed out of things with Jack and me, mostly watching from the sidelines. But this time, I needed her support. If anyone could help me navigate Jack's control, it had to be her. When I called her, she sounded surprised, but not unwilling to talk. Can you come over, Mom? I really need to talk to someone about all this. There was a pause, and I could hear the hesitation in her voice. All right, Alex. Come by tomorrow. We'll talk. The next day, I arrived at my mom's house, hoping for some kind of reassurance, maybe even a suggestion on how to get through to Jack. She welcomed me in, making tea in the kitchen as I vented everything. Noah's hostility, Jack's demand for an apology, the whole emotional storm I'd been holding inside. When I finally finished, she looked at me with a sad, almost apologetic expression. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry you're going through all this. But I don't know what I can do. You know how Jack is. I frowned. Mom, I need you to understand. He's controlling us, using money to divide Noah and me, and now he's cutting me off completely. How can you be okay with that? She sighed, stirring her tea slowly. It's not that I'm okay with it, Alex. But Jack's a complicated man. He's always had these expectations, these ideas of how things should be. And I've learned that challenging him doesn't lead anywhere good. So you're just going to let him treat me like this? I asked, my frustration mounting. Her eyes darted away, and I noticed her grip tighten on the cup. I know it seems unfair, but Jack has been providing for us. And I don't have the means to support both of you if things go south. It was then that I realized something that made my stomach turn. My mom was dependent on him. She'd built her life around Jack's financial support, and the fear of losing it was enough to keep her quiet. She wasn't going to intervene, no matter how much I pleaded. So, what? You're saying I should just give in, apologize, and pretend I'm okay with all this? She set down her cup, her gaze pained but firm. I'm saying that sometimes you have to pick your battles, Alex. I know it's hard to hear, but maybe Jack's right. Maybe this isn't worth tearing the family apart. Tearing the family apart? I was stunned. She was implying that I was the one causing the division. I'd hoped she'd understand, maybe even stand by me, but it was clear her loyalty lay with Jack, or rather, with the financial security he represented. I left that night feeling more isolated than ever. My brother had turned against me, my stepfather was demanding an apology, and even my mom, the one person I thought I could count on, was telling me to back down. It was as if the entire family had agreed that Jack's money was more important than fairness, more important than me. Over the next few days, the weight of that isolation sank in. Everywhere I looked, I was reminded of how alone I was. Friends didn't get it. They'd tell me to forget about the money or to just make peace. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about respect, about not letting Jack control my life through his manipulative conditions. Eventually, I started researching my options. If I couldn't rely on my family to treat me fairly, maybe there was a legal route. I'd heard of people going to attorneys to contest family inheritances, though I wasn't even sure that applied here. Jack hadn't promised me anything specific, but it was clear he was using his wealth as leverage. Maybe an attorney could help ensure I'd get treated fairly, even if it came to that as a last resort. I booked an appointment with a local family attorney, half expecting them to laugh me out of their office. When I sat down and explained everything, Jack's conditional support, the unfair treatment, Noah's gift, the attorney nodded thoughtfully. So you're not asking for a lawsuit or inheritance claim, but rather, a fair agreement, he clarified, scribbling notes. Exactly, I said. I don't want to take legal action if I don't have to. I just want to guarantee that I'll have equal opportunities, that I won't be overlooked because I didn't fit Jack's idea of success. The attorney looked at me, his expression serious. These types of family dynamics can get messy, especially when one person controls the finances. But if you're serious about this, we could draft a letter. It would essentially be a formal request for fair treatment, outlining the type of support you expect and making it clear that you're willing to negotiate on terms that aren't as rigid as what your stepfather insists on. A letter. The idea felt strange, like putting my family issues into writing was somehow making them more real. But it also felt like a last chance to make myself heard. I agreed, and over the next few days, the attorney helped draft a carefully worded letter that laid out my expectations, respectfully but firmly. The letter didn't demand money, but it emphasized the importance of equal treatment and the need for a family resolution. Sending the letter felt like a release, as though I'd taken the final step in standing up for myself. I knew Jack would likely view it as a challenge, and Noah would probably see it as an escalation. But at that point, I'd realized something crucial. I was the only one willing to challenge Jack's control, and if that meant losing my family in the process, then maybe they were never fully on my side to begin with. I mailed the letter, and a week passed without any response. No calls, no emails, nothing. It was as if the letter had vanished into thin air. Then, one morning, I received a single email from Jack, just 2 lines long. "Alex, I received your letter. Let's discuss your terms in person. Jack." There it was, an acknowledgement. I had no idea what he'd say, but I knew that I was ready for whatever would come next. I wouldn't be backing down this time. When I arrived at Jack's house that evening, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and calm. The letter had been sent, and Jack's response had been brief, formal, and direct. This was it, the culmination of months of arguments, confrontations, and, ultimately, a clear stance. I had come this far, and there was no turning back now. I walked into the living room where Jack was waiting, standing near the fireplace, his posture tense. Noah was sitting in an armchair, arms crossed, looking down, avoiding eye contact. My mom, Lisa, was by the window, her face anxious but resigned. "Alex," Jack began, his voice tightly controlled, "you've made yourself clear through this letter. And frankly, I find it hard to believe we're sitting here because of a simple disagreement. A family disagreement." I took a deep breath, meeting his gaze. "It's not a simple disagreement, Jack. This has been building for years, and you know it. This is about fairness, about respect. And since words haven't worked, I've had to use something more formal." He shook his head slowly, almost in disbelief. "Do you realize what you've done? You've dragged the entire family into your grievances, jeopardized our trust, and for what? Money?" "It's not about money," I replied firmly. "It's about setting boundaries. It's about knowing that, as family, we should all have a fair chance. You've put conditions on everything for as long as I can remember, and I refuse to be another pawn in your game. I'm not here to beg for handouts, Jack. I'm here to make sure I'm respected." Noah finally looked up, his eyes filled with anger. "Do you hear yourself, Alex? This is why I said you were being selfish. Jack's done nothing but help us, and now you're demanding more, acting like he owes you something." I met Noah's glare, feeling a pang of sadness beneath the frustration. "Noah, I'm not asking for anything that wasn't already given to you. And maybe if you'd seen things from my side instead of just taking Jack's every word as law, you'd understand that. This isn't about choosing sides. It's about making sure our family is actually a family, not just a business arrangement." Jack clenched his jaw, clearly holding back a wave of frustration. "Family is exactly what I'm trying to protect, Alex. What you're asking for goes against everything I believe in. Handing out support without conditions, expecting rewards for choices you haven't earned. My support has always been available, but only if you're willing to show you're ready for it." "Conditions," I said, echoing the word with bitterness. "That's all this is to you, isn't it? Money with strings attached, support with stipulations. If family is so important, why do you only treat us as worthy when we fit your definition of success?" Lisa stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Jack's arm. "Jack, maybe it's time to think about what Alex is saying. They're not asking for charity. They just want assurance that they'll have the same chance, the same respect." Jack's face softened for a moment, but only briefly. He glanced at her, then turned back to me, steel returning to his eyes. I am offering respect, Alex. But respect is mutual. I've raised both of you with opportunities, given you the tools you need to succeed. If you feel like that's not enough, then perhaps this isn't the place for you. The words hit me harder than I expected. He was doubling down, fully prepared to push me away if I didn't fall in line. But this time, I wasn't going to let him make me feel small. I'd been pushed around, sidelined, and forced to accept support on his terms. That wasn't happening anymore. Then maybe it isn't the place for me, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm not going to keep showing up to family gatherings or events where I'm treated like I'm second best, where every bit of support is another way to keep me in check. If you can't treat us equally, I'll make my own path. And I won't need your money to do it. The silence that filled the room was palpable. My heart raced as I watched the effect my words had on everyone. Noah looked stunned, as if he couldn't believe I'd actually said it. Jack's face turned a shade paler, his expression unreadable, while my mom's eyes filled with a mix of fear and admiration. Jack finally broke the silence, his voice low but biting. So, that's it then? You're willing to walk away from all of this, just to make some kind of statement? I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment sink in. Yes, I am. Because family isn't supposed to come with strings attached. If you can't accept that, then maybe it's time I find my own way. Jack stared at me, and for the first time, I thought I saw a flicker of something close to regret in his eyes. He looked at my mom, then at Noah, and then back at me. Fine, he said, his voice softer, but still guarded. You want fairness? I'll agree to a set amount, conditions-free, an amount that's equal to what Noah received. But I expect that, once you receive it, this conversation is over. No more demands. No more ultimatums. The room felt heavy as his words sank in. After everything, he was finally offering what I'd asked for. But I knew it came at a price. This wasn't a show of acceptance or love. It was a concession to end the conflict, a transactional peace offering. I nodded, forcing myself to keep my expression neutral. That's all I wanted, Jack. Fairness. But this doesn't change the fact that our relationship has been damaged. And I think we both know that this isn't about the money. It's about control. I won't let you control me, and I'm going to set boundaries that protect that. Jack's face was unreadable as he nodded back, acknowledging, in his way, the permanence of the shift that had just happened. Understood. I'll have the paperwork drawn up. The atmosphere was tense as we all absorbed the implications of the agreement. I could feel Noah's resentment radiating from across the room, his anger barely concealed. My mom, meanwhile, looked relieved, though also profoundly sad. She knew, as I did, that our family dynamic had been irreversibly altered. Even if we kept up appearances, things would never be the same. As I left that evening, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with loss. In reclaiming my own control, I'd sacrificed the illusion of a united family. Jack had shown me, in no uncertain terms, that his respect and support were always going to come with conditions. And Noah, bound by loyalty or perhaps by his own need to please Jack, had chosen his side. My phone buzzed as I got into my car. It was a text from Noah. I hope you're happy. You've completely torn the family apart. I stared at the screen, feeling a pang of sorrow but also a sense of finality. Noah might never understand, and Jack would never change. But I knew I couldn't keep sacrificing my sense of fairness and self-respect just to maintain a fractured peace. I replied simply, I had to stand up for myself. I hope one day you understand. Driving away from Jack's house, I realized that, for the first time, I felt free. Free from the conditions, free from the resentment that had weighed me down for so long. I didn't know what the future held or if my family would ever come back together, but I knew that I'd finally reclaimed control over my own life. And for now, that was enough. If you like this story, subscribe right away and listen to new stories every day. Let us know what you like the most in the comments.